Self-awareness is the capacity for introspection and the ability to recognize oneself as an individual separate from the environment and other individuals. It is not to be confused with consciousness in the sense of qualia. While consciousness is a term given to being aware of one's environment and body and lifestyle, self-awareness is the recognition of that awareness. Neurobiological basis. Introduction. There are questions regarding what part of the brain allows us to be self-aware and how we are biologically programmed to be self-aware. V.S. Ramachandran has speculated that mirror neurons may provide the neurological basis of human self-awareness. In an essay written for the Edge Foundation in 2009, Ramachandran gave the following explanation of his theory. Quote, I also speculated that these neurons can not only help simulate other people's behavior but can be turned inward, as it were, to create second-order representations or meta-representations of your own earlier brain processes. This could be the neural basis of introspection and of the reciprocity of self-awareness and other awareness. There is obviously a chicken or egg question here as to which evolved first, but the main point is that the two co-evolved, mutually enriching each other to create the mature representation of self that characterizes modern humans. Animals studies have been done mainly on primates to test if self-awareness is present. Apes, monkeys, elephants, and dolphins have been studied most frequently. The most relevant studies to this day that represent self-awareness in animals have been done on chimpanzees, dolphins, and magpies. Self-awareness in animals is tested through mirror self-recognition. Animals who show mirror self-recognition go through 4 stages: 1. Social response, 2. Physical mirror inspection, 3. Repetitive mirror testing behavior, and 4. The mark test, which involves the animals spontaneously touching a mark on the body which would have been difficult to see without the mirror. The red spot technique, created and experimented by Gordon Gallup, studies self-awareness in animals. Toivanen says on a study done on perceptual self-awareness, the attribution of self-perception to animals is based on a distinction between the experiential awareness of the soul and the intellectual understanding of its essence. A distinction postulated, quote, in this technique, a red odorless spot is placed on an anesthetized primate's forehead. The spot is placed on the forehead so that it can only be seen through a mirror. Once the individual awakens, independent movements toward the spot after seeing the reflection in a mirror are observed. During the red spot technique, after looking in the mirror, chimpanzees used the fingers to touch the red dot that was on the forehead, and after touching the red dot they would even smell their fingertips. Animals that can recognize themselves in mirrors can conceive of themselves, says Gallup. Another prime example are elephants. 3 elephants were exposed to large mirrors where experimenters studied the reaction when they saw the reflection. These elephants were given the litmus mark test in order to see whether they were aware of what they were looking at. This visible mark was applied on the elephants, and the researchers reported a large progress with self-awareness. The elephants shared this success rate with other animals such as monkeys and dolphins, chimpanzees and other apes species which have been studied extensively, compared the most to humans with the most convincing findings and straightforward evidence in the relativity of self-awareness in animals so far. Dolphins were put to a similar test and achieved the same results. Diana Rees, a psychobiologist at the New York Aquarium, discovered that bottlenose dolphins can recognize themselves in mirrors. Researchers also used the mark test mirror test to study the magpie's self-awareness. As a majority of birds are blind below the beak, Pryor and colleagues marked the bird's neck with 3 different colors: red, yellow and a black imitation, as magpies are originally black. When placed in front of a mirror, the birds with the red and yellow spots began scratching at the necks, signaling the understanding of something different being on the bodies. During one trial with a mirror and a mark, 3 out of the 5 magpies showed a minimum of one example of self-directed behavior. The magpies explored the mirror by moving toward it and looking behind it. One of the magpies, Harvey, during several trials would pick up objects, pose, and some wing flapping, all in front of the mirror with the objects in his beak. This represents a sense of self-awareness, knowing what is going on within himself and in the present. The authors suggest that self-recognition in birds and mammals may be a case of convergent evolution, where similar evolutionary pressures result in similar behaviors or traits, although they arrive at them via different routes. A few slight occurrences of behavior towards the magpie's own body happened in the trial with the black mark and the mirror. It is an assumption in this study that the black mark may have been slightly visible on the black feathers. Pryor and colleagues stated, this is an indirect support for the interpretation that the behavior towards the mark region was elicited by seeing the own body in the mirror in conjunction with an unusual spot on the body. The behaviors of the magpies clearly contrasted with no mirror present. In the no-mirror trials, a non-reflective gray plate of the same size and in the same position as the mirror was swapped in. There were not any mark-directed self-behaviors when the mark was present, in color, or in black. Pryor and colleagues' data quantitatively matches the findings in chimpanzees. In summary of the mark test, the results show that magpies understand that a mirror image represents their own body. Magpies show to have self-awareness, cooperation and evolutionary problems, just as Swiss cleaning robots perform behaviors that effectively cleans a room without being aware of it or having any program to detect debris. An organism can be effectively altruistic without being self-aware, aware of any distinction between egoism and altruism, or aware of qualia in others. This by simple reactions to specific situations which happens to benefit other individuals in the organism's natural environment. If self-awareness led to a necessity of an emotional empathy mechanism for altruism and egoism being default in its absence, that would have precluded evolution from a state without self-awareness to a self-aware state in all social animals. The ability of the theory of evolution to explain self-awareness can be rescued by abandoning the hypothesis of self-awareness being a basis for cruelty. Psychology. Self-awareness has been called arguably the most fundamental issue in psychology, from both a developmental and an evolutionary perspective. Self-awareness theory, developed by Duval and Wickland in the 1972 landmark book A Theory of Objective Self-Awareness, states that when we focus our attention on ourselves, we evaluate and compare our current behavior to our internal standards and values. This elicits a state of objective self-awareness. We become self-conscious as objective evaluators of ourselves. However, self-awareness is not to be confused with self-consciousness. Various emotional states are intensified by self-awareness. However, some people may seek to increase the self-awareness through these outlets. People are more likely to align the behavior with the standards when made self-aware. People will be negatively affected if they don't live up to the personal standards. Various environmental cues and situations induce awareness of the self, such as mirrors, an audience, or being videotaped or recorded. These cues also increase accuracy of personal memory. In one of Demetrios' Neo-Piagetian theories of cognitive development, self-awareness develops systematically from birth through the lifespan, and it is a major factor for the development of general inferential processes. Moreover, a series of recent studies showed that self-awareness about cognitive processes participates in general intelligence on a par par with processing efficiency functions, such as working memory, processing speed, and reasoning. Albert Bandura's theory of self-efficacy builds on our varying degrees of self-awareness. It is the belief in one's capabilities to organize and execute the courses of action required to manage prospective situations. A person's belief in their ability to succeed sets the stage to how they think, behave and feel. Someone with a strong self-efficacy, for example, views challenges as mere tasks that must be overcome, and are not easily discouraged by setbacks. They are aware of the flaws and abilities and choose to utilize these qualities to the best of their ability. Someone with a weak sense of self-efficacy evades challenges and quickly feels discouraged by setbacks. They may not be aware of these negative reactions, and therefore do not always change their attitude. This concept is central to Bandura's social cognitive theory, which emphasizes the role of observational learning, social experience, and reciprocal determinism in the development of personality. Developmental stages. Individuals become conscious of themselves through the development of self-awareness. This particular type of self-development pertains to becoming conscious of one's own body and mental state of mind, including thoughts, actions, ideas, feelings, and interactions with others. Self-awareness does not occur suddenly through one particular behavior. It develops gradually through a succession of different behaviors, all of which relate to the self. The monitoring of one's mental states is called metacognition, and it is considered to be an indicator that there is some concept of the self. It is developed through an early sense of non-self components using sensory and memory sources. In developing self-awareness through self-exploration and social experiences, one can broaden his social world and become more familiar with the self. According to Emory University's Philippe Brochat, there are 5 levels of self-awareness which unfold in early development and 6 potential prospects ranging from Level 0, advancing complexity, to Level 5, Level 0, confusion. At this level, the individual has a degree of 0 self-awareness. This person is unaware of any mirror reflection of the mirror itself. They perceive the mirror as an extension of their environment. Level 0 can also be displayed when an adult frightens himself in a mirror, mistaking his own reflection as another person just for a second. Level 1, differentiation. The individual realizes the mirror is able to reflect things. They see that what is in the mirror is different from what is surrounding them. At this level, they can differentiate between their own movement in the mirror and the movement of the surrounding environment. Level 2, situation. At this point, an individual can link the movements on the mirror to what is perceived within their own body. This is the first hint of self-exploration on a projected surface where what is visualized on the mirror is special to the self. Level 3, identification. The individual finds out that recognition takes effect. They can now see that what's in the mirror is not another person, but it is actually themselves. It is seen when a child refers to themselves while looking in the mirror instead of referring to the mirror while referring to themselves. They have now identified self. Level 4, permanence. Once an individual reaches this level, they can identify the self beyond the present mirror imagery. They are able to identify the self in previous pictures looking different or younger. A permanent self is now experienced. Level 5, self-consciousness or meta-self-awareness. At this level, not only is the self seen from a first-person view, but it's realized that it's also seen from a third person's view. They begin to understand they can be in the mind of others. For instance, how they are seen from a public standpoint. infancy and early childhood. By the time an average toddler reaches 18 months, they will discover themselves and recognize their own reflection in the mirror. By the age of 24 months, the toddler will observe and relate their own actions to those actions of other people and the surrounding environment. There are multiple experiments that show a child's self-awareness in what has come to be known as the shopping cart task. Children were asked to push a shopping cart to the mothers, but in attempting to do so they had to step on the mat, and in consequence, the body weight prevented the cart from moving. Around school age, a child's awareness of personal memory transitions into a sense of one's own self. At this stage, a child begins to develop interests along with likes and dislikes. This transition enables the awareness of an individual's past, present, and future to grow as conscious experiences are remembered more often. As a child's self-awareness increases, they tend to separate and become their own person. Their cognitive and social development allows the taking of another's perspective and the accepting of inconsistencies. By adolescence, a coherent and integrated self-perception normally emerges. This very personal emerging perspective continues to direct and advance an individual's self-awareness throughout their adult life. Adolescence 1 becomes conscious of their emotions during adolescence. Most children are aware of emotions such as shame, guilt, pride, and embarrassment by the age of 2, but do not fully understand how those emotions affect the life. By age 13, children become more in touch with these emotions and begin to apply them to their own lives. A study entitled "The Construction of the Self" found that many adolescents display happiness and self-confidence around friends, but hopelessness and anger around parents due to the fear of being a disappointment. Teenagers were also shown to feel intelligent and creative around teachers, and shy, uncomfortable and nervous around people they were not familiar with. Philosophy. Locke and early philosophical discussion of self-awareness is that of John Locke. Locke was apparently influenced by René Descartes' statement, normally translated, "I think, therefore I am." In Chapter 27 on Identity and Diversity of Locke's an essay concerning human understanding, he conceptualized consciousness as the repeated self-identification of oneself through which moral responsibility could be attributed to the subject, and therefore punishment and guiltiness justified, as critics such as Nietzsche would point out, affirming, "The psychology of conscience is not the voice of God in man, it is the instinct of cruelty, expressed, for the first time, as one of the oldest and most indispensable elements in the foundation of culture." John Locke does not use the terms self-awareness or self-consciousness, though. According to Locke, personal identity depends on consciousness, not on substance. We are the same person to the extent that we are conscious of our past and future thoughts and actions in the same way as we are conscious of our present thoughts and actions. If consciousness is this thought, which doubles all thoughts, then personal identity is only founded on the repeated act of consciousness. This may show us wherein personal identity consists not in the identity of substance, but in the identity of consciousness. For example, one may claim to be a reincarnation of Plato, therefore having the same soul. However, one would be the same person as Plato only if one had the same consciousness of Plato's thoughts and actions that he himself did. Therefore, self-identity is not based on the soul. One soul may have various personalities. Locke argues that self-identity is not founded either on the body of the substance, as the substance may change while the person remains the same. Animal identity is preserved in identity of life, and not of substance, as the body of the animal grows and changes during its life. Describes a case of a prince on a cobbler in which the soul of the prince is transferred to the body of the cobbler and vice vice versa. The prince still views himself as a prince, though he no longer looks like one. This border case leads to the problematic thought that since personal identity is based on consciousness, and that only oneself can be aware of his consciousness, exterior human judges may never know if they really are judging and punishing the same person, or simply the same body. Locke argues that one may be judged for the actions of one's body rather than one's soul, and only God knows how to correctly judge a man's actions. Men also are only responsible for the acts of which they are conscious. This forms the basis of the insanity defense, which argues that one cannot be held accountable for acts in which they were unconsciously or irrational, or mentally ill, in reference to man's personality. Locke claims that, whatever past actions it cannot reconcile or appropriate to that present self by consciousness, it can be no more concerned in it than if they had never been done, and to receive pleasure or pain, i.e. reward or punishment, on the account of any such action, is all one as to be made happy or miserable in its first being, without any demerit at all.